So like what I used to tell people, my clients when I managed money for rich people at Goldman Sachs was they'd ask me how much money can I spend every year, and I'd say, and this is sort of a rule of thumb of investment, if you've retired and you've got a giant stash, right? Rule of thumb, how much of that stash can you spend every year? And
in retirement, while you're in retirement?
While you're in retirement, and have that stash stay there, right? Not
so
go
these are
down.
mostly retired people that are asking that question.
Yeah, or super rich people who, and the answer that we would give in this sort of a rule of thumb is like a 4% number, right?
Oh, okay.
And so you can spend, if you've got $100 million in the bank, you can spend $4 million a year and keep doing that forever.
You would have clients who had $100 million, and you'd give them that advice and say, spend your $4 million a year.
Yeah, and that's very common, by the way. Like if you're a university and you've got an endowment that's supposed to last forever,
right,
their rule of thumb is usually 4 or 5% a year is
Budget,
what they
right,
will spend of their giant pool of money that's supposed to last forever. So if you think of us as individuals, right, we're taking our money every week, we're putting our 20% into our stash. And the hope is someday we can stop working and do what we want. Maybe
right,
that's sit at the beach. Maybe that's
make a movie,
be a comedian. Who knows?
Right.
But that 4% number, and I think a lot of people are thinking like, well, if I just win the Powerball and my denominator, I've got $100 million, $4 million is plenty, and I'll be fine. Well, I worked at Goldman Sachs, and some of my clients who did not have $100 million, I paid their Amex bill for them, and they were managing to spend $400,000 a month on their Amex bill, which is, $4.8 million a year, which means they were spending more than that. You can spend as much. People will spend as much money as you want to spend. There's no shortage of how much money you can spend. And I think that people spend a lot of time worried about building up that denominator, that $100 million pot, and not enough time thinking about that numerator. How do I control my spending? And
how do I reduce the 4.8 million I'm spending per year?
Right. And so like one way you could do that is instead of renting an apartment, you could buy an apartment and then pay down a mortgage over 20 years, and now you don't have to pay rent anymore,
Yep.
right? So you've lowered that numerator. That's actually a big step that takes you closer to retirement than waiting to win the Powerball, right?
Right.
And
so buying your real estate that you're going to live in, for example.
buying real estate, right?
Everyone should go into farming, is what you're saying.
Well, so that would be the next step, right? Like, what are your expenses? And this is very individual and very specific, but in a lot of American society, consumer-based society that you talk about, Amr, is go buy what you want and just spend. I would suggest if you really want raspberries, you should plant some raspberries in your bush, because raspberries at Whole Foods are $3.99. They might be $4.99 next year. They could be $6.99 in 5 years. If I've got a raspberry bush, I don't need to buy any raspberries. My numerator has gone down, and that actually made my stash, the requirements of my stash would be lower. I wouldn't need as much money in the denominator to retire.
So starting to get smart about your individual life. So what you guys don't know who are listening is Ted is an award-winning raspberry and blueberry pie chef.
My mom is. My mom is the pie chef. Has she actually won awards?
What award? The Nobel Peace Prize?
She's won a couple pie contests.
Really?
Yeah, there are a handful. There are pie contests out there, and she has won several. She's won a berry pie contest, at least one, and she's won 2 apple pie contests.
Damn.
So she's a very good pie maker.
I'm not gonna lie. I want to have one of her pies right now.
Yeah, we're happy to try them on the show. If
We'll do that. We call them Dye's pies, and they are excellent.
We'll link in the show notes.
Yeah, but I actually want her to open a pie shop.
Of course,
in the
that's
city.
obvious, right?
It's a no-brainer. But part of the problem is the input costs in making pies are highly variable. In the summer, if you're making your blueberry and raspberry pies, blueberries and raspberries are really expensive.
Yes.
And no joke, my mom's pies take about $45 a berries on some days.
One pie.
One pie, because it'll literally be 4 or 5 pints of blueberries and 4 or 5 pints of raspberries, and at like $4 or $5 a pint, times 4, 16, 32. That's $32 a berries. It's expensive.
Yep.
That's an expensive pie, and so that's why I planted the raspberries and the blueberries.
So you've inherited the blueberry pie, raspberry pie.
I've got the recipe.
Yeah.
The
And
secret is not
them.
in the berries. The secret's in the crust, guys. That's what makes the pie. It's all about the crust. But I'll make a pie for you, and it'll be delicious.
I can't wait. But so you've actually planted raspberry and blueberry bushes on your property.
On my homestead. which is the Riley family. I've got 6 kids, so food is a big input for me.
Right.
So we planted
and
raspberry.
one pie ain't gonna do it for 6 kids.
No. We've got multiple raspberry and blueberry bushes planted in the yard, and the idea is to try to yield as many pies out of the garden.
You should
as
figure out
possible.
how to plant some kind of a diaper tree or something like that. Because
Yeah.
we have 2 kids and we're going through tons of diapers. I can't imagine 6 kids.
We should, so now I've been composting,
Yeah.
I'm actually thinking like maybe I should get recyclable diapers and just like use human compost waste, which actually is now legal again. It's interesting. It was illegal for a
Would you
long
use
time.
cloth
Thank
diapers?
God. I've been breaking the law.